Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Jason Howell and I talk with Joseph Menn over at Reuters about his exclusive report. Turns out Apple reportedly dropped plans for encrypting iCloud backups after the FBI complained. Then we chat with Joseph Cox of Vice about the alleged hacking of Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos' iPhone by the Saudi crown prince. Afterward, we had a chat with Tanya Basu of MIT Technology Review about the Human Screenome Project. Would you want to take a screenshot of your phone every 5 seconds for science? Then we round things out with a discussion of Flybrains and Microsoft's Surface Neo and Duo. Stay tuned. Tech News Weekly is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Securing every access point in your company doesn't have to be a challenge. LastPass unifies access and authentication to make securing your employees simple and secure. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 117, recorded Thursday, January 23rd, 2020. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by UStudio. UStudio hosts, manages, and distributes private, secure podcasts for businesses. Improve your company communication by up to 500% through a private podcast with UStudio. Request your free trial or personalized demo today at ustudio.com.
And by Zapier. Zapier connects all your business software and handles the work for you, so you can focus on what matters most. Right now, through the end of next month, go to zapier.com/TNW for your free 14-day trial. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show.
Right.
That's it.
That's
the
it.
one.
You got there.
The show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I'm Mikah Sargent.
And I'm Jason Howell.
Yes, he is.
We got some big news this week.
Big news. In fact, we're going to kick things off with what I found to be a fascinating story, so much so that I talked to Leo about it earlier this week on iOS Today. Turns out, which that's a trademarked term, turns out Apple actually dropped plans for encrypting iCloud backups after the FBI complained. This is, of course, according to sources from Joseph Menn at Reuters, who wrote this report. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this story, and I'd love to kick things off kind of, one of the things that comes up with these reportedly, allegedly, et cetera, reports is sort of what the sourcing is. So can we start there? Obviously, I don't mean naming direct sources. I just mean who generally did you speak to about this that gave you this information about Apple dropping plans for encrypted backups?
Sure. So, I worked on the story for quite a while, and I was fairly explicit about my sourcing and about what I did know and what I didn't know in the piece, which ran on Reuters earlier this week. But the short answer is I spoke to one current and 3 former FBI, senior FBI people who are familiar with what happened, and one former and one current Apple person familiar with what happened. And then there's sort of backup from a 7th person, another former Apple employee who was told, in the same time frame that legal had killed the project, but wasn't told that followed an FBI meeting. So it adds backup, but is not one of the direct people who said, the 6 people agreed that the timeline was Apple had this plan under a couple of different keywords to encrypt, or at least offer the option to fully encrypt everything in iCloud backup. The FBI said this is going to kill us. It's going to really hurt our investigations, and then Apple dropped it. So we have 6 people agreeing on that sequence of events. But to be honest, I didn't have. There was nobody who was in the room who said it was because of the FBI's objection that they did it. Some people on the FBI side and some people on the Apple side say, well, that is the only logical explanation, but I don't have proof of that, and I said so.
Yeah, so understood. I'm glad that we, like I said, I think that that's an important point to get out there, that we know exactly sort of where this sourcing is coming from and how this works. So iCloud Backup is a service in which the things on your device, your what apps you've downloaded, not necessarily the apps themselves, some of the information, your photos, your messages, your health information, these different things get uploaded to Apple's servers and stored there so that when you get a new device, you can essentially set up your phone as if it were like the old phone. That kind of works between devices too. You can use an iPhone backup for a new iPad. In certain ways, it brings some of that information over. And we have seen in the past that Apple, when asked for help decrypting devices, they say, well, we can't do that because we don't have the keys to it. However, we can give you decrypted iCloud backups because we do have the keys to that. So can you talk about sort of what is the actual plan that was dropped here? If Apple does end-to-end encryption of the device, what is the difference here in the encryption that's taking place?
Well, what they could have done was entangle the encryption that's on their servers with the user's passcode to open their device, but they didn't. Google's Android offers a backup that is related to the access to the device. So Google actually does offer end-to-end encrypted storage. Apple was going to do something like that, and they decided not to, and instead, and I think people don't realize that given the reaction to my story and a lot of the questions that people were throwing out there on Twitter, the language on Apple's website is very dense and it's confusing. And they talk about, well, it's encrypted, and then certain things are end-to-end encrypted for sensitive information. But the sensitive information they're talking about is health stuff, HomeKit, which is used for home electronics controls, and like Wi-Fi passwords and the like. Those are specially encrypted, and Apple can't see it, and therefore the feds can't see it. In law enforcement in other countries. But you would think that like iMessages are pretty dang sensitive, and contact lists and WhatsApp messages. But all those, if you use iCloud backup and you don't toggle the which app you're doing it for, those get stored in plain text. So your iMessages are end-to-end encrypted, but you're holding one of those ends, and if you're it's backing up what you see, not what the encrypted version is. So that's all accessible to the feds. Right.
Now, one of the things that I think is an important question here is, what was the reason, in talking to the different sources that you spoke to, what was the reason given for why Apple chose to drop the plans to completely encrypt the iCloud backups where they didn't have a key?
So the FBI believes, people high up in the FBI believe that it's because it's so valuable for law enforcement. It's kind of been one of these open secrets in law enforcement that, crooks with iPhones think they're being pretty clever, but a lot of crooks are dumb, and they don't read the fine print, and they back things up. And it's super, super valuable. So in thousands of cases every year, it's in Apple's transparency report. They hand over content from which could include full iCloud backups, or it might just be contacts or photos or something more specific that's asked for in the warrant. But it's especially true in intelligence cases. So in the most recently reported 6-month period, in 18,000 accounts, content was handed over for the FISA court, FISA court demand, where they don't have to have probable cause. It has to be relevant for a spy investigation. The thresholds vary, but it's a low standard. And that's a lot of accounts getting turned over. And so they made the case to Apple that it would really hurt those investigations, and do they want to harbor criminals? So that's the law enforcement side. On the Apple side, I think the feeling was that San Bernardino public opinion was with Apple, but not by a lot. And I'm talking here about the FBI, the court case, the fight over whether Apple could be compelled to decrypt the terrorist shooter's phone. Which is something that's playing out again in Pensacola with the Saudi Arabian national accused of killing 3 people. and phones that are unbreakable, or in theory unbreakable. So Apple took some lumps for protecting a terrorist. That's not a place you want to be in, and some of the people within Apple felt like they didn't want to go through that ringer again. It wasn't worth it. There, and it depends what your sort of your moral logical gymnastics are. But you can say that, well, hey, we are protecting privacy. If you're not smart enough to read the fine print in the privacy policy, then maybe that's not where we don't have to do that for you. That's on you. We will make it possible for you to have a secure information. We're just not going to make it super easy.
Understood. Now, Apple is always, or in these cases, has kind of always been in the news. It's been this Apple versus FBI, but they're not the only iOS, or they're not the only mobile operating system maker. I'm curious, what is a company like Google doing in this space? Are they looking at when backups go up? Is it the same kind of encryption? What's that look like?
Okay, so I want to preface this part by saying that one of the things, I think the Apple story that I wrote is interesting on its face, but I also think it's a really good example of something that is pretty widespread, but that nobody has an incentive to talk about, and therefore it stays mysterious or a little understood, which is that there's a lot of cooperation between tech companies and the government, but in a lot of different ways. So a classic way that happens is, a given Fed or local police department say, hey, we got somebody who's missing. We're trying to find them. Can you tell us where they last were? And the company says, no, but you could ask for this sort of thing. And they explain how to ask. And then the cops say, okay, thanks. And they ask the right way. And then they get something that's very useful. That sort of thing and sort of more sweeping things happen a lot because most people who work at tech companies don't want to be helpful, want to help customers who may be missing or in danger or victims of fraud. And most people in government don't want to tell software companies how to run their business. It's just that the public rhetoric and the court fight is this pitched battle stuff where the tech companies complain about backdoors. They're trying to force backdoors on everybody. And the feds complain about going dark. And, today it's terrorists. A couple of weeks ago, it was child sex predators, whatever. They want access to everything. So those are the two sides that are arguing. But behind the scenes, there's actually a lot of wheeling and dealing. And this just happens to be the best case that I've found of a compromise like that, where, again, nobody has an incentive to talk about it because the feds don't want to, the companies don't want to say, hey, we protect your privacy except when we don't want to. And the feds don't want to punish those companies in the public sphere for actually playing ball. They want to say, hey, look, Apple is helpful. So that's why these things rarely get out. Now, to answer your question about Google, Google, as I said, does offer fully encrypted Android backups. They don't talk a lot about it. They put out a blog post in October 2018 when they announced it. And, again, it's like you have to be on, it was the Pi version of Android. Your carrier has to offer that, whatever. So it hasn't sunken in with everybody yet. I believe it is the most popular installed version of Android right now, but I don't think it's over 50% yet. But that's not a complete lifesaver if you care about security and you happen to be using an Android, because it doesn't protect you on, say, Gmail. Or other major Google services. Those are not end-to-end encrypted, and those feds or whomever can get directly from Google. It's just the phone itself. So there are some things on your phone that previously were backed up to the cloud that the feds could get, but if you do this, then they can't get that. So that is possible. It will not protect your Gmail, Gmail contacts, other things like that.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Joseph Menn, and thank you for this report. Everyone should go check it out over at Reuters. But if people want to follow you online, where can they do so?
I have the unimaginative Twitter handle at Joseph Menn, MENN, and I guess folks could read my terrific book on the cult of the dead cow, the most influential U.S. hacking group of all time, which came out in June.
Yeah, and I should say I had the opportunity to speak with Joseph last year on that topic. So fantastic book. Everyone should read it. I love the topic, and it's really great to get you on again. Thank you so much for taking time, Joseph.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Up next, we look inside the technical report behind the hacking of Jeff Bezos' iPhone. See, I told you we had a lot of big news on this show today. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by UStudio. Now, as an enterprise, utilizing innovative business solutions keeps you ahead of the curve. You should know that by now, whether it's for sales, accounting, or marketing. It helps increase your bottom line, the most important thing. Just as important for company growth is how you communicate with employees, your customers, your vendors. UStudio actually offers an awesome enterprise solution for business communication, and one that I believe in. You know I believe in, and you know that we believe in it because we're doing it. Podcasts. UStudio hosts, manages, and distributes private podcasts for businesses in both audio and video format. Now, whether you lead sales, marketing, IT, HR, or maybe you're a part of the C-suite, you can imagine all of the innovative ways that you can use UStudio. You can provide secure, on-demand training across any device for your remote global workforces, of course. You can distribute confidential product updates securely to your sales reps, share weekly messages from the CEO to everyone, easy to get through UStudio, and a whole lot more. UStudio provides the customer support and resources needed to ensure that you can launch and maintain a successful company podcast. And UStudio's secure podcast solutions ensure your confidential business information is never discoverable online. So you can make sure the right people get that podcast. Quickly authenticate users using SSO or other authentication protocols. You can restrict access by department, by seniority, even location. And UStudio's proprietary technologies provide detailed analytics on podcast engagement so you know when, where, and for how long your users are listening. That's deeper metrics than you can get on normal podcasts. Really powerful stuff. It's no wonder companies like Salesforce, Facebook, Nike, and Dell all trust UStudio to power their private podcasts. So go to ustudio.com today. You can request your free trial or a personalized demo, and be sure to mention that you heard about it from us, Tech News Weekly. That's the letter U, studio.com. That's ustudio.com, and we thank them for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right, so earlier this week, The Guardian broke a major story reporting that the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, allegedly hacked the iPhone of Amazon chief Jeff Bezos back in 2018. Really juicy stuff. And now Vice's Motherboard got a hold of a report that shows exactly how it happened. And joining us to talk about the report is Joseph Cox, returning to the show, senior staff writer for Vice's Motherboard. Welcome back, Joseph.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you back. So first things first, I suppose, how did Bezos and Nbs come to communicate within WhatsApp? I think that was kind of the first thing people were noticing is like, whoa, they're in connection, they're communicating on WhatsApp. That feels kind of interesting in and of itself, let alone everything that comes after. But how did that begin, and how did this alleged hacking go down that we know of?
Yeah, so according to the report that we got, which is from FTI Consulting, the firm that Bezos eventually hired to investigate this alleged hack of his phone, it doesn't just lay out sort of the technical information they have, but also the chronology of events that they believe led up to this. So to answer your question about how they started chatting in the first place, in April 2018, they had a dinner in Los Angeles. Apparently they swapped numbers there. And then I believe a couple of days later, Bezos just reached out, says, hello, MBS, the acronym often used for the Crown Prince. And he replied. And then they didn't really chat for a while until May, when the Crown Prince seemingly randomly, out of context, sent an MP4 video file to Bezos's phone. And then that's when the weird stuff started to happen, according to the investigators.
The weird stuff.
weird
Okay,
stuff.
so man, so many places you can go with this. So this video file, I mean, is there any indication that Bezos was alerted to kind of the strangeness of suddenly getting a video file out of nowhere? Did he open it? Like, was it enough of a vector for him to have just received that video file, or did he have to play it, or do we even know that about this?
So this report is kind of filling in the blanks of a chronology we've had for a while. Previously, we knew that intimate photos of Jeff Bezos had been leaked somehow and were given to, I believe, the National Enquirer, US sort of tabloid newspaper. They then tried to blackmail, essentially, Jeff Bezos about this, and he came out at the time and says, they have photos of me, I'm not going to succumb to these threats. And then shortly after, Jeff Bezos's security head wrote an op-ed in the Daily Beast saying, well, making this very explosive claim that it was the Saudis who apparently hacked his phone and then obtained this information. So we knew that was that sort of information was out there, but we didn't know the exact chronology of events until this comes out. So when Jeff Bezos gets this video, he doesn't. That hasn't happened. It's only later when the photos get released that people start to go, oh, maybe the phone was hacked, and then that's when they started to investigate. When FTI Consulting did eventually, communicate with Jeff Bezos, tell him, hey, we believe it's the Saudis who did this, seemingly randomly out of the blue again, a day later, the Crown Prince WhatsApps Jeff Bezos saying, hey, everything you hear about Saudi Arabia is wrong. There is no beef between Saudi Arabia and Amazon. And I mean, kind of played his hand, at least according to the report, because that was non-public information at the time. But people didn't know that Jeff Bezos was investigating this alleged hack of his phone. But somehow the Crown Prince texted him out of the blue about it.
Oh, that's fascinating. Okay. Wow. Now there's kind of some speculation around like, okay, well, who actually sent this, right? Obviously, it's coming from the account of MBS, but anyone could have access to that. Is there any sort of certainty or at this point as far as like whether MBS specifically was like, hey, I think I'm going to hack Jeff Bezos, that kind of, I know to a certain degree kind of seems outside of his pay grade, but maybe not. Maybe it was him. Any certainty there?
I mean, it's still wild. Even if it wasn't the Crown Prince and it was just someone using his account, that is still crazy. I mean, usually when we have like phishing emails or dodgy links, it's going to be from someone pretending to be someone else. From all intents and purposes, according to the FTI Consulting investigation, this was the real Crown Prince WhatsApp account. Now, as you say, maybe the Crown Prince wasn't controlling it. Maybe he gave it to, one of his commanders or someone else to then send the malware, if that's what happened. I mean, indeed, one of the senior Saudi figures has a reputation for sourcing this sort of malware. He bought hacking tools from the Italian surveillance company Hacking Team, and then later had a share in that company as well. So Saudi Arabia definitely has the access to these sorts of tools, but we don't know whether it was, the Crown Prince doing it exactly, but apparently it was his account, which is already crazy enough.
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal in and of itself. What's lacking here in this report? Obviously, it's it can only go so far. What do we not know? What are some of these holes that are still left kind of unanswered at this point?
Yeah, so The Guardian, as you said, initially reported on the piece, and the FT also mentioned the FTI consulting report, and then eventually we obtained it and we just published it in full because there was still a lot of information not quite known about how this hack allegedly went down. When we pushed that out, we also spoke to various iPhone forensic experts specifically, and they saw some issues. One of the main ones is that the report only really relies on network data, as in they looked at the phone, and they never actually found a piece of malware. They never found a piece of malicious software. What they did find was that shortly after the video file from the Crown Prince account was sent to Jeff Bezos, a large amount of data allegedly started transmitting from the phone. Sure, that's notable, that's interesting, but some experts are saying that, I mean, that's not necessarily enough to say that there was malware. So what they could have done, what several experts said, was they could have jailbroken the iPhone, which of course lots of your viewers will be familiar with, and this will allow you to get sort of a lower level insight into the iPhone, and that, if anywhere, that's where government grade malware is probably going to be visible after you've done that process. And judging by the report, we don't know if they actually did that. Potentially it seems not, but there are still plenty of avenues for investigation, and some people are pretty skeptical about the attribution claims, or at least they want to have more information before making a solid estimate on this hack.
Okay. So, given that this is very incredibly likely to have happened, like, what's driving it? What is the motivating factor behind the scenes here to bring them so close, so focused on Jeff Bezos and his phone?
I mean, of course, it's hard to mind read it. It's hard to figure out intent, but there is enough context to work at least something out.
Yeah.
Of course, Jeff Bezos is the owner of the Washington Post, which hired the columnist Jamal Khashoggi, which the Saudis went on to brutally murder in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. And shortly after these various reports about hacking came out, Jeff Bezos himself tweeted an image commemorating Jamal Khashoggi. So that would appear to be the main link there. Apparently, Jeff Bezos was also exploring business interests in Saudi Arabia, but I would probably frame it more in the context of Saudi Arabia, as I said, has these capabilities of these spying tools and also has a history of aggressively surveilling critics, including those close to Jamal Khashoggi. So this would probably, if we're going to assume the hack happened, sits within that context of spying on dissidents or rivals or activists. Of course, Jeff Bezos is not any of those, but he was facilitating, let's say, Jamal Khashoggi's publications.
Right, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Now, because there's a lot of people, and organizations at play here. We've got the Saudis, who probably have something to say about this. We've got Jeff Bezos himself, who I'm sure has something to say. And then, of course, we've heard from the UN. Like, what is the conversation that's swirling from the people who are actually active in this story right now?
So, unsurprisingly, the Saudis have come out and completely denied it all, said these claims are absurd. But then the Wall Street Journal reported yesterday that Saudi officials close to the Crown Prince knew about the plan to hack Jeff Bezos. They did not know about the alleged plan to then blackmail him with photos afterwards, but they said they were aware of a plan to hack him. The UN has called for an investigation to this. The chronology of this was that FTI Consulting completed this report, the one that we obtained and published. They provided it to the UN, and then reading that report, they then called for an investigation. So it looks like there's mounting pressure from various different groups here. And of course, there's also the malware companies which sell these sorts of capabilities. We don't know which specific company provided the tool here, if one was indeed in this hack. It could be NSO Group, it could be Hacking Team. It's now been renamed Memento Labs. Both of those strongly deny their tools being used in this attack, but we don't know yet.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, Joseph Cox, really appreciate you taking time. It's great to get you back on the show. Joseph is a senior staff writer for Vice's Motherboard. If people want to follow your work online, where can they find you?
Just at vice.com/tech, or Joseph F. Cox is my Twitter as well.
Right on. Excellent. Thank you for your time, Joseph. We'll talk to you very soon.
Appreciate it. Now, up next, genomes are so last year.
Tell me about it.
Now we're talking about screenomes. What that means and so much more up next. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Zapier. Growing a business is hard. You don't want to be wasting hours every day moving data from emails to spreadsheets to your CRM to wherever you need it to go. Shouldn't that just happen? Well, Zapier can help. Zapier has more than 1,500 apps and is the easiest way to automate your work. You can focus on what matters most by connecting all your business software to engage your leads instantly, to automatically import new customers, to notify your team about opportunities. Zapier also is more customizable. You can use multi-step zaps, so it makes the possibilities virtually endless. Instead of having just one, if this thing happens, then I want you to do this. It can be, if this thing happens, I want you to do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then just goes on and on and on. It's so fun to go to Zapier and say, okay, I've got this app, and I've got this app, and I've got this service, and I have this service. What can I do with all of these things? And then Zapier can give you some options, some different ideas for ways to connect those tools together. It gets a lot of fun, and you can get super nerdy and get into it if you want to. But you don't have to get super nerdy and get into it if you don't want to. In fact, you can build the solution you need in just minutes. You don't have to waste your time on tasks that you know could be automated, because that's exactly what Zapier was built to do. You go to zapier.com/TNW. You connect the apps you use most and let Zapier take it from there. Best of all, It's easy to build the exact solution you need in minutes. You don't have to write code or ask a developer for help. You can join more than 4.5 million people who are saving an average of 40 hours per month. I think I just ran the math on that, and that's an entire work week each month saved by using Zapier. I have talked before about how I use Zapier and continue to do so. For example, with this show, there is a tool to convert a script that we have for our prompter into the proper text file and make it so that it pops up automatically in Dropbox. And pretty soon, I'm going to look at making that even more involved by actually going into the Google spreadsheet we use to plan the show and pulling the script directly from there. That is going to be some next level stuff that I am really excited to give a try. So like I said, it's a lot of fun to just go in and start adding things together, seeing what services you have and seeing, oh, wow, I can do this. It gets exciting, gets fun. Make more time to grow your business. Worry about that instead of all of this other stuff. Right now through the end of the month, you can try Zapier for free by going to zapier.com/TNW. That's zapier.com/TNW for your free 14-day trial. Zapier.com/TNW.
Thank you, Zapier. All right. You've probably heard already of the Human Genome Project. Who hasn't? But what about the Human Screenome Project? Not Screamome. That would be different. The Human Screaming Project. That's something different. This is the Human Screenome Project. It's an interesting concept that involves taking snapshots of our phones, people who are participating anyways, every 5 seconds in order to better understand how we live our lives in the digital realm. And joining us to talk about our screenomes, maybe someday we'll have our own screenomes to talk about, is Tanya Basu from MIT Technology Review. Welcome to the show, Tanya.
Hi.
It is great.
Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. It's awesome to get you on. Thank you for taking time for us today. So first of all, exactly what is a screenome, and do you have a screenome? I'm very curious.
Ooh, I was wondering that too. Good question.
We all have screenomes. Technically, It's not that mine's public at this point. I don't think yours is either.
No,
so the idea is, as you alluded to, the genome, where scientists were trying to document every single gene in our system and try and understand and combat genetic diseases. And the idea is that there's a lot of social ills that can be connected to technology and technology use. So why don't we screenshot our screens every 5 seconds and understand what we're doing with our time on our digital devices to understand whether and how it's affecting our lives?
Now, in order to do this, it requires a pretty big ask of anyone who might be participating. It's
huge ask.
You're basically giving over every detail of how you use your smartphone in order to actually participate in this. Why would anyone ever choose to do that? Is I guess my first question. Did you happen to talk with people who were willing to give over that information, and kind of how do they navigate that decision to do that?
I actually was not able to talk to anyone, but, a lot of people are willing to do this. Apparently, Byron Reeves, who's the researcher leading this project, said that he's got hundreds of people offering their information. And given that people are growing up digitally native and have a sense of what is going into the project, they're very open about it. They're not hiding it. There apparently is an audience of people who are willing to provide their information for science.
Now, one of the questions that I have, and I feel like we've all taken that class where we learn how to properly read a scientific study and understand what parts go into it and what's involved there. One of the things that I have, and I'm curious if it is a sort of concern for the folks that are doing this project, this study, is whether or not the data is going to be influenced by the fact that someone realizes that they do indeed have an app screenshotting them every 5 seconds. Is this something that they've taken into consideration? Because I think it would change my method of use on my device if I were aware of the fact that every 5 seconds. I just don't want everyone to know that I really love Teletubbies still, and I want to keep it a secret.
Well, now we know.
Oh, darn it.
Now we know.
This is live. Shoot.
Yeah, that's something I actually asked. And I think that what's really interesting is Reeves was very hesitant to tell me that, someone is going to change their activity based on, the fact that there's this presence hovering in the background and taking your screenshots every 5 seconds. But he said that what he's found, they've collected about 30 million screenshots, by the way, so far from hundreds of volunteers. And what they've found is that people tend to forget. The way I think about it is actually it's kind of like reality TV syndrome, where you're aware of the cameras being there for a bit, but as you go on your daily activities, as you use your phone, it seems like a lot of these participants seem to forget or at least not care as much. And so another question I asked was about privacy. There's bank account information going here. There could be illegal information going on. There's private text. There's private information that's just being displayed on your screen constantly. And he said, we have access to that. We're not going to see it because there's a computer that's going through and making sure that that information's not being shown. But apparently people are comfortable enough to, do their private, sensitive information and have it displayed on their screens.
I mean, more and more in this day and age, I think there's a desensitization happening
1,000%.
Around what we feel comfortable sharing, and the more we share, the less strange it is to share more.
The more we share, the less we care.
Yes, that's exactly it. It feels that way, anyways, right now. Okay, so what is this informing them, the people who are kind of running this project? What exactly can they glean about this when they see one person using their phone one way and another person using their phone the other way? Like, what does it lead to? Where does that path lead?
I think a lot of times when we think about how people are using their phones, we're thinking, these people use their phones X amount of minutes per day. And this is something you actually see a lot in children and teenagers and how we're understanding how they use it. Research has usually said, teens use their phones from the minute they wake up to the minute they go to bed, and they use it for 2.5 hours per day. That's a really, vague statistic that doesn't necessarily give you any granularity, doesn't give you any information. And what researchers are hoping to understand is, perhaps, kid A is using his phone to produce YouTube videos and is really obsessed with food, for example, and maybe watches a lot of recipes and tries to create that sort of content for TikTok. Person B might be different in that they're just primarily content generators and users where they're just texting friends or family constantly and using their phones as a way to connect with others. So understanding those differences, even in the same demographic and age group, is very interesting and important in our understanding of how perhaps certain people are using their phones in certain ways and others are, using it and maybe getting, like I said earlier, affected by it in their daily lives.
So what's the scope then? This is kind of a project. A certain number of people are participating already. Are the people who are running this, are they hoping to broaden that out so that anyone can jump on board and choose to share every 5 seconds of their phone use if they really want to do that? What is there a pathway for people who want to get involved in this that they can do so?
There's a website. They just went public. They announced their launch in Nature last week, Nature the journal. You can join if you'd like. They are actively searching for volunteers. Obviously, as with any scientific study, the more people that are part of the experiment, the better the data, the better the information that's provided, the better our understanding. So if you are so inclined to offer your phone and whatever you're doing, you can join at Human Screenome Project.
That's right. And I'm looking it up right now, screenomics.stanford.edu. And they've got a nice site with a bunch of information there. If you're totally on the fence about sharing everything that you do online, maybe you can go there and and fall off the fence.
Just fall off the fence into the deepest chasm.
That's right. Very fascinating stuff. Interesting that we are here. I think the initial reason I reached out was just that kind of shocking moment when you realize every 5 seconds of your phone use, and I think anyone would read that and then go, wait a minute, how do I use my phone?
Yeah.
Would I even feel comfortable with that? Whether you're doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable or not, that's an open book that I just don't know that I'm ready for that. So I guess I'm impressed that enough people are willing to do that. Tanya, Basu, we really appreciate you taking time to join us today. If people want to follow your work online, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter. My hashtag is @my#. Oh, my goodness.
We should start a hashtag for you, too.
We should. You can follow me at Tanya Basu, TanyaBasu.
Right on, Tanya. And hashtag awesome. We'll just attach that. Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Well, we've talked about genomes.
Yep.
We've talked about screenomes.
Yep.
Why don't we talk about connectomes?
Gosh, this show's full of ohms.
We're full of ohms today. So this is kind of exciting. The most complete brain map that we have is here, and it is of a fly, our dear friend Drosophila I can't say the next part. It doesn't
just
matter.
Call that fly Dro.
Dro the fly. But
Dro the fly.
Drosophila, they are a very popular fly for all sorts of genetics research, for all sorts of scientific research in general, because they just multiply. So they're a really good thing to study. But we took this fly and created a brain map. Now, it took 12 years and more than $40 million to be able to chart this fly's brain. As you can imagine, a fly is very small, and so its brain is very small inside, about the size of a poppy seed. And the region of the brain that they mapped is about the thickness of 2 strands of hair. And that cost more than $40 million and 12 years to do.
12 years.
Yes.
That's unbelievable. That's crazy.
Wowie, wild. So here's what's interesting about this. When it comes to being able to understand something like the brain, or frankly anything, I mean, think of your car. Before you can understand sort of how all of the different parts work together, you kind of have to know what those parts are so that you can understand it and talk about it and explain it, not just to yourself, but to other people. So once you know where the alternator is, and you know where, that's about the only car part I can think. The transmission is, then once you have that mapped out, then you can start to talk about how those different things kind of work together to produce all sorts of things. So we have to start with the connectome. This is an area of the brain that contains 25,000 neurons and 20 million connections between them. It is basically kind of the regions of the brain that are responsible for navigation, for learning, and for memory. Flies actually have pretty good memory, better than a goldfish. Maybe better than me, because my memory's kind of crud.
Mine too.
Okay, cool. So these Drosophila definitely have us beat. Anyway, whenever we do get these so-called, as they're calling them in this article, I kind of like it, wiring diagrams figured out, then we can start to see how those different areas interact and provide more information for not just brain science in general, but specifically when it comes to genetics and brain science, and how, again, we go back to these flies. There's a reason they're using Drosophila. You can not only do they mate and create lots of children, but they grow quite quickly. So you can get new adult flies quite quickly, and they sort of genetically split. And so by doing that, you can see how, okay, if we adjust these certain genes while we're working on this fly, then we start to understand how it changes the brain. And that just opens things up to a whole new kind of science. So it's really fascinating stuff that's going to lead to lots of discoveries in theory. And it's no wonder that they've spent, at least $40 million, and that it's, this has taken 12 years to do. The way that I came across this story was because Google played a role in this report, and I had trouble kind of digging into what exactly Google did and how it all worked. So I haven't gotten to the place where I can describe exactly what it is. So I'm just going to kind of quote a little bit from this Wired article. Google uses a machine learning technique called flood filling networks. So you used to kind of have to detect the boundaries between neurons and then group together related pixels. This actually fills in neurons one at a time. And so it's kind of like creating a painting to sort of create the map. So it sees the image and it uses machine learning to kind of fill in data to create these images. So the computer worked, and then a team of 50 proofreaders went over the algorithm's results looking for erroneous shapes and connections. So I like that computers don't get to do all of the work and can't do all of the work. It does involve some human steps in the process. But
checks and balances, basically.
Yes, checks and balances. But this is also so very fascinating. So you should definitely check out this Wired report. But yeah, we've got our genomes, and apparently screenomes are on the way. So I'm excited that we've got a fly's connectome before we move on to, in theory, a human connectome.
Wow. If it took 12 years for a fly's connectome, and the fly brain is as tiny as it is compared to us. It's large compared to other things. Just depends on perspective. Just imagine how long it's going to take for us to understand that about the human brain. On the Wired article, there is a little snippet of the coloring that you were talking about, where Google's algorithms, they say, paint the black and white images of the neurons, and it's actually really pretty. It's cool. It's one of those ways, on a completely different topic, where I feel like we're entering a world where computers can create art that is as artistic as humans create art. Now that's pretty. That's really cool.
If you cross your eyes and look at the middle distance, does an image of a fly appear?
I see Snoopy.
Oh, I think I see a cockatoo.
But you know what? It's open to interpretation. That is really neat, though. That's definitely one of those articles that I can go, whoa, and then also, yeah. I only understand a certain portion of that article, but man, 12 years is a long time, and I'm happy they finally got there.
Me too. Congratulations.
Yay, we win. Woo! Shifting gears a little bit here, Microsoft is nearing the release of its dual screen devices, the Surface Neo and the Surface Duo. You may remember these from last year.
Oh, you bet I do.
And apparently you do, because you're really excited right now. Mm-hmm. As such, it now has announced new dual screen preview SDKs. That's, of course, so that developers can begin to prepare for this Microsoft-infused dual screen world. So, if you are a developer and you want to kind of get a head start on developing for the Duo, which is the Android dual screen device that everybody was doing flips over last year, there's a preview SDK for the Surface Duo, has native Java APIs that support dual screen development so that developers can get started. Android emulator with Surface Duo image preview that's integrated into Android Studio for testing Android apps. That way, this doesn't come out and your app doesn't scale across both screens properly or does something really weird, which you have to imagine is probably going to be pretty easy to do. So
yes,
if you're a
many
developer,
apps
get
will
started.
Probably be having some issues at kickoff.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if everybody's prepared, it's probably going to happen anyways. And then apparently on February 11th, Microsoft is going to do a pre-release version of the Windows SDK to support this. Native Windows APIs for dual screen development. Microsoft emulator that actually supports and simulates the dual screen device for app interactions. Same thing there. But I think what really caught my eye on this was that Zach Bowden from Windows Central took the Surface Duo emulator. Surface Duo, of course, is the Android device. So took the new releases that support the Surface Duo and the Android emulator. For a spin, released 2 minutes of footage of kind of how app interactions look at this current state. It's not perfect. It's a little buggy, but it really shows you how things move fluidly between both screens and how all that works. And then Jonas Dehert, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name, on Twitter, he's a product design and visualization expert, took that video file output and embedded it into a still of the Surface Duo. So you start to get a sense of how the Duo is going to operate when it comes out. And I don't know, it's pretty cool to watch kind of how things kind of fluidly move from one side to the other. There's a part where you're on the home screen and the bottom row pinned icons are stretched out like right now. And then when something comes up on one screen, those icons all kind of shift over onto one screen in a nice fluid manner. This is more than we've seen yet.
Absolutely.
As far as how this works. So
you know what we
it's
saw
cool
before
to get that
this?
insight.
We saw someone hold up a thing
On stage.
and then they said holiday 2020 and then they put it away.
Right.
So this is a lot.
Yeah, totally. So I'm intrigued. I'm curious to know how you feel about dual screen devices based on what you know.
I'm super pumped about this. When Ant and I covered the Windows event where they announced new hardware, and of that hardware, the Neo and Duo were part of it, I was already excited. I think it was it the Courier project that Windows did many a millennia ago? I remember just drooling over, I think it was like a YouTube video, watching it over and over again, and just wanting this dual screen device that they had created at the time. And, that got shelved, got put away, got tucked away.
I found a link to it. I'll put it in the doc for John.
And I wanted it to exist so much. And so now, seeing the Neo and Duo and being happy with what Microsoft has done in hardware as of late, I actually have faith that the company can deliver on a well-done device. And I'm pumped about it. I think it'll be interesting. And so, yeah, I don't know. Seeing this actually have a thing that's going to be rolled out to developers soon, just more, it pushes forth the idea that yes, this definitely will be a device that's going to exist, and they're actively working on it. And it's, holiday 2020 might actually be a great estimation of this tech. So yeah, I'm pumped, and I can't wait to see even more as more developers get their hands on it and start working on these devices.
Yeah, I really hope. And it's Microsoft, so I have to imagine they're going to come out of the gate with something that's really solid as far as this is concerned. But I'm also an Android user, and I know that over my life of using Android, my adult life of using Android, there are a lot of things that promise to be really cool, and sometimes that works out, and sometimes it just ends up being kind of kludgy and kind of feels broken or unfinished or whatever. Since Microsoft is driving this, maybe I should have a better, kind of more positive outlook on it then, and I kind of do. I think Microsoft's probably going to be able to pull this off pretty well, but I'm still like slightly hesitant. Like, okay, maybe it just sounds like a great idea, but then once you get your hands on it, it's not quite as cool as you think it's going to be. But I think it's I love to see the different approach. That they're not just kind of like doing the same old thing again.
Yeah, I call that protective pessimism. Okay, if you get super excited about a thing only to be disappointed, then it's a bummer. But if you go into it, I'm a little skeptical, I'm a little pessimistic, you're protecting yourself from disappointment, and then you get to be shocked whenever it's awesome. So
yeah. No, you know what? Everything's going to suck. And then when it doesn't suck, I'm delightfully surprised.
Yes.
See? This is a great way to live life.
I came into the show thinking it was going to suck, and wow, it's been a great show.
Wow, it's been amazing. See?
I feel so good.
We keep surprising you, Mikah. This is a good show.
Every day. Every Thursday. At what time?
Well, that would be 11 a.m. Pacific. I had to do that out of order, so sometimes I have to think about it.
Threw you
Out
off.
of order. Tech News Weekly publishes every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. Yeah, you can watch us live, but really, you want to subscribe. That's twit.tv/TNW. You can go there and subscribe to the show in audio and video formats.
And by the way, it is time for Twit's annual audience survey, and we want to hear from you. So, these shows, we offer them for free. Sponsors, it's a sponsor-supported show, and we thank you for, reaching, by helping us by going and getting Casper mattresses and subscribing to Zapier and things like that. We love that you do that. But another way that you can really help us out and kind of give us an idea of who you are is by filling out the survey. It's only going to take you about 5 minutes. All you do is head to twit.to/survey20. Very important you get that number there at the end. And let us know what you think. There's no sign-up form. We're not tracking you or anything like that. Your feedback just helps us make Twit even better. We get an idea of the audience that's out there, and it also helps with our sponsors so that they know a little bit about who in general they're talking to. This is because we want to stay away from all of that deep tracking and knowing how many minutes of a show is watched and who's tuning in and from where and all these different things. This is a more generalized approach that, yes, as we said, no sign-up form or anything like that. We're not tracking you. So we do appreciate it. It's only going to take you 5 minutes. And in fact, I am going to be completely okay. If you want to just go ahead and turn off this podcast right now and head there, I will not hold it against you. That's twit.to/survey20. So please head there. And of course, you can also be a part of the show by emailing us at tnw@twit.tv. And of course, follow us on social media. Here we go for the tease. That's at Twit on Twitter. That's at twit.tv on Instagram. And at Twit Talk on TikTok. As well as heading to twit.community, which is where we have a community of people posting, and there's a Mastodon too. That's at twit.social. So if you've
got all the things.
Yeah, if you're not a big Twitter person, but you want to be a part of sort of a new way to toot, not tweet, as Mastodon calls it, you can head to twit.social for that. What about you, Jason?
I have no tease to announce at this time. You're at Mikah Sargent on Twitter. I'm at Jason Howell on Twitter. That's really about it. Follow us on Twitter. Thanks to everyone who helps us do the show each and every day. That's John, Jeff, John, Burke, Colleen was in here, Masako was in here. We have so many people who help us do the show each and every week, and we really appreciate their help. We wouldn't be able to bring it to you if they weren't helping. So thank y'all for doing that, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Oh.